Hey everybody, this is Carl back again for the final wrap up of Independence Day movie month, and I wanted to cover Forrest Gump. It's probably like the most all American type of movie, given the fact that this character, probably the most iconic character in Tom Hanks' repertoire. I love Tom Hanks. It's like honestly, one of my favorite actors, and like just America's dad altogether. But man, like I think this is probably like the first. No, it's probably like the second Tom Hanks film I've probably seen. I think like the first one was uh Turner and Hooch, or was it Big? I don't know. I know like Forrest Gump wasn't the first one, but it was definitely like the second or third. But it's definitely one of my favorite Tom Hanks movies, besides maybe like Toy Story. Oh, and then like Saving Private Ryan, which I would do that one for next Independence Day theme month. As a matter of fact, do I have that on a freaking list? I don't know. Yeah, I do. Okay, right next to G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra. I know. Don't get me started on that. But anyway, yeah, man. Before we get into it, please, if you haven't already, like and subscribe, hit that notification bell. Do as well live on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/talkativecarl. If you watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and check out my other previous videos that I posted up on the channel. I recently posted, a couple of X-Men comics, X-23 solo adventure, as well as Dazzler. So check those out. Check out my Patreon, patreon.com/talkativecarl. Follow me at my Twitter handle as well as Instagram. Yeah, man. Honestly, this movie's like made tons of money at the box office. It's made stupid amount of money. It had like a budget of $55 million, which I think, when this was released in 1994 was, reasonable. But it raked in $678.2 million in the box office. Now, of course, I'm not sure how is it for adjusting for inflation, but I imagine, by today's standards, it'll probably be in the billions. Hell, it damn near was about being the billions even back then. This was directed by Robert Zemeckis. Now, of course, Forrest Gump, played by Tom Hanks. Jenny Curran is played by Robin Wright. Gary Sinise, as his most iconic character of all time, Lieutenant Dan Taylor. Michael T. Williamson as Bubba. Sally Field as Mrs. Gump, Forrest's mom. Haley Joel Osment will be, Forrest Gump Jr.'s son later on. But anyway, this is set way back in 1956. I'm getting ahead of myself. Like it opens it's a very beautiful opening. Honestly, it's very serene and just gets you in like, oh, you're in for like a nice time. This is like, just you see this feather floating down, and you see Forrest sitting at the bench, picking it up and putting his little scrapbook thing. And of course, various people are sitting on the bench. At this point, is 1981, and various people are waiting at the bus stop, and he's telling these stories about certain things that happened to him throughout his life, and he inspired, or at the very least was influential through the course of American history since his time in college moving to the present. And there's always things I've been curious about it, because people who got to go on the bus, they never hear the rest of the story. I'm like, you would probably be engaged and like, okay, I want to know how the heck that this ends. Because like, dude, you was a, you know, you met like a couple of presidents, and he's so nonchalant about it because the character has like a 75 IQ level, so he's only just below average. Uh, which is, you know, made him lovably dumb. But as a kid, it's kind of like, it was kind of like a struggle. But he was, you know, he's kind of oblivious in a way. He had like a kind of a curved spine as a child, and so because of that, he had to wear these leg braces. And I never even noticed until I rewatched this when the doctor inserted into the sentence that, you know, his legs are very strong. It's just his spine they need to be like straightened out, and it become crucial when like he breaks out of those things in a very cool way. But anyway, he ends up meeting Jenny, this young Jenny, who became his one and only friend, because everybody kind of bullied him because of the braces on his legs and his, you know, his slow dim-wittiness. And one day, you know, some kids were chasing after him, and it's a very cool moment, just like, you know, because he's a poor kid. It's like, you know, he's, you know, he doesn't know any better. It's not his fault, and he's just a nice kid. And you know, he doesn't. I mean, he knows, but he doesn't know, kind of thing. Because it's not like, you know, he like I said, he's just below average. That means he has some cognitive things going around, but he just doesn't. I'm not a doctor, but he just doesn't like retain it the same way as almost anybody else would. But you know, he can eventually do. But you know, he realized, oh, the kid's throwing rocks at me. Oh, and Jenny's telling him to run. And of course, you get the iconic line, "Run, Forrest, run!" And of course, because this movie, I'm pretty sure a whole swath of people have seen that parody, like on, like, you know, like for no, like, you know, for no end in sight, especially throughout the 90s and early 2000s. Same way with the Terminator with like "I'll be back" line. It's like, you know, it's been done to death so much. Matter of fact, it's probably rare to hear that nowadays because it's been done to death so much. Same way with that line, like, "I've fallen, I can't get up," because of that stupid life alert commercial back in the day, if you remember that. I think I wasn't alive yet, or probably was a baby when that was like a popular, because I think it came out in like early 80s. But I've seen it as a kid on commercials, because they played it to death for a long time. It's one of those things that's kind of been done to death. But you see in that very inspirational music playing, and this kid, because it's like, you know, you want that kid like escape, because these little, you know, pissant little kids is throwing rocks at him and gonna beat him up, and he just like, you know, wobbling, and like, I didn't get to the point with the mom because Sally Field played the hell out of it. So everybody's done like a fantastic job in the roles they were given. It was like top notch, and you know, bless the mom's heart, because she did not want, you know, her son to be held back in any kind of way just because of what his appearance is or his IQ is. She even like had sex with the principal just to get him into the school where he initially wanted to put him into, you know, a school for people in his like IQ level. Of course, it was, mentally challenged. You know, because back in the day we used like that slur R word that we don't anymore. But you catch my drift, because there are schools like that. And she didn't want her son to be held back. And it was like a funny little moment because the kids outside, you know, swinging on his swing set, and you hear like this dude's like making like a loud moaning noise, and and the principal walking out was like, man, your mother really wants you to have that education, son. Like, do you understand anything I was saying? And like the kid, and the kid's very good, but it's like he responds like, hey, 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 hey. The kid's done a phenomenal job portraying like a young Forrest, the same way as Tom Hanks did, with the whole mannerism and the speech patterns, and the way he pronounces his name, Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump. My name's Forrest Gump. It's like, it's just like, the kudos to the kid. They, you know, he nailed it. It's like, it was like 1-for-1. Like, this is like, you know, Kid Forrest right here. But anyway, like, he's wobbling along, and you're just like rooting for the kid to get away, and he just like, and just like almost you know, just like Hulk's, you know, like I'm always angry moment, and he just bursts out of those, you know, braces, and he, the most iconic runner aside from like the Flash or Quicksilver, the most iconic runner in a film, and he just like books it. And then it's kind of flash forward. I think it's like 10 years later, so it's in like the mid to like 60s at this point. And like now these punk teenagers are trying to chase him after this pickup, and like he outruns the truck and passes through a football field, and you see some college, you know, recruiters looking at, you know, some students, and he like, oh, like I want to get that kid because it's the way he's, you know, maybe he can just outrun, you know, everybody on that field. So it became like a kick runner, and he eventually, like, because he played for University of Alabama for 1962, and then the team, you know, went to see John F. Kennedy, and because like it's like they get like all these little free stuff, like, you know, food and stuff, and he drunk all the Dr. Peppers. I'm like, you don't think, of course he doesn't think, he like, you know, it's like, why didn't nobody just stop and like, whoa man, like save some for the rest of us or something? He drunk all the bottles that was there. Of course it's the White House, of course I can just get more, but that's not the point. So now he has to the bladder's full, and they all stand in line to shake their hand with the John F. Kennedy, and as soon as Forrest's turn comes up, and like, you know, John F. Kennedy, you know, asks like, how's it feel to be all American? While everybody else says like, felt great, sir, and Forrest is like, I have to go pee. It's like, oh my, it's like, oh my guys, it's like he embarrassed himself, and his mom, just the stunned look on Sally Field's face every time he just like, you know, just embarrasses himself. And she doesn't even have a talk with this guy like before this whole ceremony commences. But then of course he graduates. Then this, you know, army recruiter pops up, started handing out pamphlets to join the army. Don't know why the mom didn't bother to stop him, because like, given the fact that it's like IQ level, but knowing Mrs. Gump, you're like, I'm not gonna have my son be held back if he wants to do this, you know. I'm not gonna tell him like no. So he ends up getting like picked up, and kind of, well, it harkens back to him as a kid when he meets like the school bus driver, and like it was a very sweet moment because like, you know, because Forrest telling the bus driver like, my mama said like I'm not supposed to talk to strangers, and she was like, well, this is the bus to school. Well, and Forrest thinks for a second, and then like, my name's Forrest Gump. And then the bus driver introduces herself, and he was like, well, I guess we're not strangers anymore. It was very sweet. But Stark contrast to him going on the bus to the army, and it's like, and he just immediately gets yelled at, and nobody wants. Once again, nobody wants to sit next to him except he meets Bubba. And it's like, I'm not sure, like, what Mr. Williamson's like, how he came up with the look of Bubba, just having his like that lip just sticking out, because his lips are not like that for real, but it's like little lip, like way out to here, and it's like, it was, as a kid I could not help but stare. I was like, why is his lip so freaking huge? It's not even matching his top lip at the very least. But of course he like he mentions like he's born with like large gums or something like that. So of course Forrest is like he might have like a bit of ADHD or something. I'm not a doctor, but he just seems like he picks up stuff. You tell him, something specific, like when it comes to ping pongs, because he becomes like a famous ping pong player. It's like one of the guys who introduced him to the game, like the main goal is to keep your eye on the ball. And it's like, okay. And he comes like, very adept to it. So they instruct him how to assemble a firearm, and he does it so efficiently and beats the record. It's like, and the instruction song, it was really funny. It's like, Gump, how did you assemble that weapon so quickly, Gump? Because you told me to, Drill Sergeant. God damn it, Gump, you're a goddamn genius. Oh my god, it was really funny. I was like, this delivery of it is really good. Oh my god. So, and then all the while, Bubba just, because he, hopes to one day own a shipping boat business, and he goes about, because he tells Forrest about how his grandmother and great grandmother all serve their, because they're black people and it's the South, they're slave masters, all these different kinds of shrimp. So over time they learn how to cook shrimp in all these various different ways. Shrimp potatoes, shrimp soup, shrimp salad, shrimp burgers. It's like, oh, and it's like, I forgot how monotonous that sounds, and it's like, it's like you can easily get annoyed by that. It's like you've been carrying on like for I don't know how long with all these various different ways of cooking something as like shrimp. But I digress. But then they get Forrest is on leave, and he realizes from like a magazine that one of the other soldiers hands him, and he sees a picture of Jenny in her Letterman's jacket, and got expelled because she did like a photo shoot for Playboy. And Jenny's gone through like I won't air my grievances about Jenny, because her and like the chick from Titanic, I mentioned this a couple of times throughout like my streaming of either video games or just like talking about other movies and such, but Jenny and the lady from Titanic movie is probably the most unlikable protagonist, personally to me, that I ever seen. Jenny in particular strings this poor guy along, and I know she apologizes in the end for all that stuff, but it's just like, yeah, you're going through stuff, because but it still seems very whack to me. But Jenny, of course, matter of fact, Forrest mentions Jenny had a little sister. We never see her, which is kind of weird. Why you mentioned you never even gone to even bring her up at any point. But Jenny has been like, abused by her alcoholic father after the mom passed. And then she went to go live with her aunt. But then when she got a little older, she like, found college, but not before Forrest trying to go visit her one time, sees some guy like taking things too far when she said no, she doesn't want to, go that far sexually wise. And Forrest just jumps in immediately because kudos to Forrest, because like I said, he may be a little slow, but he picks up on certain things and he knows that's wrong, like Jenny being assaulted, and so he jumps in, knight in shining armor, and just like, like that's wrong, and he immediately beats up whoever harms her violently. uh and matter of fact, there was one moment after the whole situation in the car, and she sneaks Forrest, because it's raining, and she sneaks him inside the her college dorm while just to dry off, and she tried to like put the moves on him. But as a kid, I never understood that, and I think my grandfather tried to explain that to me, because I remember watching this with him, and I never knew like what the heck he was like. But he obviously, in terms of he kind of premature ejaculation. But as a kid, it's like, I know somebody tried to explain it to me, but I probably just didn't remember. I kind of probably blocked it out or something. But it's like, wow, that was like sounded like very weird response to me. But she now, after being tossed out of college, she is is working at a strip club, playing a guitar on stage, but naked. And of course, some dude's getting fresh. You're not supposed to touch the girls any kind of way. But of course, Forrest jumps in and saves her, whatever. But it's just like, you knew what kind of like business you're in, and you're trying to like play a music in front of an audience that's there to only for one thing, not like a concert, to be fair. Of course, Jenny like is going through stuff, and she's trying to escape. She mentioned about how like she always wanted to fly. She really wanted to escape from her problems. But it's been a couple of times she tried to delete herself, but she's stops herself before that happens. But she then tries to hitchhike, tells Forrest it's probably best to stay away from her, but Forrest is just telling her like, I'll write to you, I'm going off to Vietnam soon. And then she gives him this kind of warning, like if you see any sign of trouble, just run away, okay? Don't try to be a hero, just run away, because she still cares about him. And knowing like going off to a war, and she fears for his safety, because he's kind of simple, and he's got a good heart, and it's been the only good thing in her life that she doesn't want hurt. That's probably the last thing she wants. So she, at the very least, she wants to at least part some kind of wisdom on him, just so he can try to stay alive. So he goes off. Him and Bubba meets Lieutenant Dan, who's pretty much like a chill kind of lieutenant, and they barbecuing, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of that when certain troops are on leave, and like they're kind of like in their own little sections, like safe areas before they go off on like a mission. And you see like this bit of history with Lieutenant Dan, because he had ancestors who fought in wars since the American Revolution, like the American Revolution, the Civil War, WW 1, 2, and now it's down to Lieutenant Dan. And that's the thing with, like, I guess that the Taylor family is like, it's honorable to serve for the country and die on the battlefield like an honorable death. Very Bushido honorable warrior type of guy. Then after like like 40 days of rain, or at least no, not 40 days, but like a couple of months of just pouring rain that doesn't seem to have no end in sight, and they're just going through the muck and all this other stuff. Then one day it stopped raining. Then the Viet Cong attacks. Remember, this is during the height of the Viet Cong War. Uh, Several of Lieutenant Dan's men are annihilated, and since it was an ambush, uh, uh, Lieutenant Dan and Bubba's screaming at Forrest to run, Forrest, run, and of course Forrest follows suit and just runs, and because he's a great runner, he outpaces everybody. And so as he like I say spot, and he really turned around and he realized he's just by himself, and he realized he's worried for Bubba, his good friend. So he runs back to look for Bubba, but he sees like all his other soldiers in his squad, and he picks up several others, even Lieutenant Dan, who's lost his legs in the firefight. And so despite his protest, Lieutenant Forrest didn't want to leave anybody behind. It's wrong, so he carries them all out to a safe spot, and he runs back for Bubba. But Dan tells him, I just called in an airstrike. They're gonna be here in minutes. You don't have time. And it's like, I gotta find Bubba. And so he finds Bubba. He gets shot in the gut. So he carries him off. And at this time, like after carrying Lieutenant Dan, he gets like shot in the buttocks. But he didn't let that discourage him. And this dude, while shot in the buttocks, outruns an airstrike. Like, holy crap. This dude can run. And the cinematography in this is phenomenal, man. This is brilliantly done. And this movie's phenomenal. One of the greatest films in history, honestly. I'm not sure, but it should be in like the National Archives of greatest cinema ever created by mankind, that needs to be like put in like cold storage, that needs to be like preserved for all time. But right along with like the first Superman movie and a couple of Spider-Man films, the Godfather trilogy, Back to the Future, things like that. It's like the most greatest films, one of the greatest films ever made by mankind. And I argue like there's a few MCU films that need to be going to part in the archives too. Like the first Iron Man film, first Avengers film should be in the National Archives, because like not only it set off like what we have right now, but it changed the world of cinema forever. And I think like leave a comment below, let me know what movies in the past like 10 12 years that should be in the National Archives as far as like changing the game in terms of cinema. I think Frozen probably should be in the National Archives, because like, since you will, how like I want to say, I don't want to use the word annoying, the Let It Go song, but it drives most people crazy, it gets in your head. But it's a very, very well done film. One second, everybody, I gotta put you right back. Take a brief period on this. Sorry. Here's some nice little music for you. I'll be quick. Sorry, everybody. Anyway, so after um, the firefight and uh, they're in the safe zone, Bubba's bleeding out, and it's always stuck in my head. There's like certain lines in this movie gets like really stuck in my head. Whereas like Bubba, clearly, it's like because Vietnam did a number on knowing the American troops at that time, but like because obviously it was like a war that we shouldn't have ever had been involved in because we were essentially we're the aggressors, and Viet Cong, at least the Vietnamese has never been conquered by anybody. It's just like with Iraq. It's one of those unconquered territories, despite the vast majority of the overwhelming force of an opposition that arguably should had no problem, like on paper, should be just been like a month's worth of progress of just sweeping over a particular smaller area. But we all got our butts handed to us, and of course we stopped getting the support that we need from people at home who sees like this is like an unjust war. And of course the flip side to that, they did kind of treat their own American soldiers as pariahs after the war. If you look up like the history books on how like the even war veterans of today ain't treated that well. But the only difference is we don't like as because back in the 70s, the veterans of the Vietnam War were just almost like you didn't want to like spit on just to put out a fire. That's how vile people were. And I don't want to say vile, but just like they saw them as like death dealers or working for the man, and it's like all this other stuff. It wasn't necessarily wrong, but they really kind of took out their anger on the wrong people that was just following orders, and like most of them probably didn't agree with it either. But it's like they didn't deserve like that level of vitriol that the higher ups that they answer to have given them to do. But today we don't treat our troops like that. We just don't give them the necessary support like we probably should be giving them. Because there's too many homeless veterans out there in the world. Like LA is probably like one of the biggest. Which we should like make sure we rectify that. But anyway, Bubba dies there on the beach. And it's like he makes this line. It's like, like I want to go home. And you can tell, like, oh, man, you feel so. And like, kudos an actor, man. You feel that for Bubba. It's like, oh my God, this, and it's like so many. You can't help but think about so many. Because I don't know, not even sure, like, when this movie came out, how many of the people who were involved in Vietnam who were still alive at that time who saw this movie probably got triggered by some of those, because I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of men that they lost that they all felt that way. They got like shell shock and everything like that, and just like they just didn't want to be there. It got that horrific because you heard this line about war is hell. So you just like, oh my God, it's like a gut punch, man. No pun intended. So a bunch of them, including Forrest, are recuperating in like an army hospital. And Lieutenant Dan is just kind of like, gotten bitter and bitter by the day, given the fact that, he not only lost his legs, but he didn't die with honor on the battlefield like his ancestors did. Because he feels that was his destiny, and Forrest cheated him out of that. Of course, Forrest is not like, attuned to like his lieutenant's bitterness. he just like playing ping pong and he's getting very good at it. And then there's a one where I can't help but laugh because it's actually kind of serious, but it's just like, I don't know how, because don't know if like, he's supposed to be in the, maybe because it looked like bunk beds. Maybe it's just, by like the way it looks and shot, because it feels like Forrest is always, I don't know, me as a kid, I always view that as like he's on like there's bunk beds and he's on the top bunk, but it's a hospital, so it's like a regular bed. And you just see his like this arm just creeping up and just like janks him down. And see this Lieutenant Dan and just like uh like you cheated me. Do you know how it feels to have not the use of your legs? And the voice is like, actually, yeah. And I imagine like Dan just thinking like he's just stupid, but it's like he actually is being serious about that. It's really funny. Uh, and he says like, what am I gonna do now? Like, I'm Lieutenant Dan Taylor, and Forrest, in its kind of simplicity, it's like you still are. And it's like, God, that's like a great retort. I was like, he takes it very matter of factly, but you can hear like you can't help but like it's kind of deep, and he doesn't even realize how deep it is. So eventually the Forrest is going to get the Medal of Honor for what he did, saving like so many of his buddies off the field. And he's going to tell Dan, but he got discharged and he's going home. So we won't see him for a while. Oh God, what was next? Um. Uh. Uh. After getting the award and everything like that, and his mom there to, celebrate that moment with him, he's, visiting, DC and stuff like that, taking the photos and seeing the sights and everything like that. Then, he gets pushed into like this rally, and then, he's supposed to, they asking him like, what's it like, out there for real. And like as Forrest is about to make this I kind of wish I want to know what he actually said that was so moving and beautiful that it brought the guy on the stage to tears. But some disgruntled like army guy kind of yanked the cord, so the mic got cut off. And so Jenny, who's now a hippie, is like, because she's like abusing drugs at this point, just trying to escape her issues. Because therapy wasn't like a really like a push forward thing during those days, even though they would have access during this point, obviously, because ever since Sigmund Freud, and like a term of a therapist has always been around, but never like really sought after as like, unless it's like something very dire or something like that. Because they always think like, oh, only crazy people go to therapy kind of situation, and like, it's supposed to be just for, if you're just going through stuff, you can need somebody to talk it out professionally. But Jenny sees him across like the Washington, like, that pond thing, and she's just crawling into the water, which you shouldn't be able to do. Now I'm thinking about it, because it should be kind of like, maybe it wasn't back then, I don't know, but it should be like having like some kind of rope or guardrail around it. But she's hopping in the water, and like Forrest sees her, and like they, embrace and everything like that. Is one of the most iconic shots in this film. And they start, talking to each other, like regaling each other about what each other been doing this whole time since the last time they saw each other. Then she introduces him to her, friends and all these people like from the Black Panther Party, and you know, Abby Hoffman, he meets her, not realizing who she really is. Um, uh, and of course, like you see this like abusive boyfriend, like I said, Forrest beats him up and everything like that. And uh, they get tossed out, but having like a fight there in the room. Um, but Jenny uh decides to go back with the guy who hit her, and so they say their goodbyes once again. And of course, then Forrest gets into the whole ping pong tournament against like U.S. versus China to serve his country in other ways and stuff, which gained him like a lot of fans, followers, and endorsements and all that other stuff. And of course, he eventually meets like John Lennon and what's the other guy name on the Dick Cavett show. And of course, he's sees like Lieutenant Dan afterwards, and now he's not homeless, but he's like alcoholic and war veteran, and he's kind of bitter because like Forrest getting all this fame and notoriety and everything like that, but like look at me, it's kind of like messed up. He views it, but they end up spending like the holidays together, New Year's. Then there's these two prostitutes that Dan know that he's trying to hook up with one, and the other is trying to make out with Forrest, but he's kind of rebuffing her because he's still in love with Jenny and he doesn't like her cigarette breath. And they call him stupid, and Dan, who still sees like kinship with Forrest because this is brother in arms, and it's like don't call him stupid, and they end up fight and everything like that. But then eventually, after he was honorably discharged, Forrest goes back home, and he decides to take like a lot of the money he earned from those endorsements to buy a shrimp boat so he can fulfill his promise to Bubba, who said that they was going to go into business together because they became so good friends during the war. So he took the money, got himself like a boat, and he's having a difficult time catching shrimp. Then he sees Lieutenant Dan, and Dan fulfilling his promise during New Year's, where he was like said like, hey, if you become like a shrimp boat captain, I'll be your first mate. And then you realize he actually did it after getting one of his Forrest's letters, and it's like, well, memo word, I will be your first mate, but I will never call you sir. Is that understood? Like, yes sir. Respecting the hierarchy there. So after a few difficult times, you see like Dan going through his own little issues, where it's like he's coming to terms with God and everything like that after this big storm that their boat somehow survived, and everybody else every other boat else got like destroyed. They were the only boats that actually catching all the fish that the other boats can't catch at this point, and they made themselves into multimillionaires. And then Forrest get a call. Before we get into that, they earn so much money. Forrest gives half of his earnings to Bubba's family because it was Bubba's idea, and he want to make sure that his family is well taken care of. Even a nice little turn where it's like now Bubba's mama is getting served by white servants in a nicer house. This is like a nice little moment. I always love that moment. And then of course they invest in certain things, and eventually Dan invested some of his money into like Apple stock that Forrest have no clue about what it is, but he gave some of that to Forrest. He really doesn't have don't have to worry about money anymore at this point. And now he's just mowing lawns, at the college campus, for free, because he just think it's comforting, that and fishing. Eventually, Jenny shows back up after so many years of abuse and drugs and stuff like that. She is essentially getting herself clean and everything like that. And it's like they had this little moment where Forrest asks her will she marry him, and she was like, "You don't want to marry me, Forrest." And it's like, and this always stuck with me. The one thing out of this entire film that always stuck with me over the years, and I use this line a couple of times myself here and there, especially when it comes to a girl. Like, it's like Forrest tells her, because he shows like you may have like a 75 kind of IQ. Don't know how it advanced over the years, because considering he should be in his 30s or so by this point. And he tells Jenny, it's like, "I'm not a smart man, but I do know what love is." And it's like, it shows that he's not as dumb as people think he is. It's like, sure, he's not as quick on the uptake, but he's still getting it to a certain degree. And I like that line. And he just tells like Jenny, he shows that like, "Look, you have not been treating me well, and I've been taking it in a stride." At least how I'm interpreting it. Like, he's taking it in a stride because he still cares for her, and he probably knows on certain levels she have not been, doing good. But he's glad she's still there. And the fact that he's still, because that's why I don't like Jenny, because he's been stringing this poor man along this whole doggone time. And knowing that, because tells all his time when it comes to some females that, wasted their years doing, dumb stuff. Like messing around with men that they ain't supposed to be messing around with. Doing things like, not all women do this. There's only a fraction of the amount of people that does this, but like abusing drugs and all this other substance, and and just doing the flower child hippy dippy thing, throughout the couple of years, between spurts of meeting up with Forrest again. And again, like I said, I get it. She's going through some stuff, but at the same time, it cannot excuse like this to a certain degree. So later on that night, Jenny makes up with Forrest. They end up having sex, but then early in the following morning, she gets a cab ride and just leaves because she never wants to stick around. After Forrest sees that she just gone, he just like felt like running, and so he starts running, and he kept going and going, through parts of the U.S. and slowly he started getting followers, and not like social media followers, they're like literal followers. But people are running, and every time they see him, they try to catch up and get reporters asking like, "Why are you doing this? Are you doing it for feminism? Are you doing this for world peace?" I was like, I just felt like running. And then he meets up with like a guy who came up with a slogan about like, shit happens. And it's like holy shit, you just ran through a pile of dog shit. Like, it happens. I was like, it happens. Shit happens. And made money off of that simple slogan. Even though I would argue that I'm pretty sure people have been saying that for longer past, since that. But then he meets the guy who came up with the whole concept about like that, the happy face on the yellow color. You see that kind of that image like on Watchmen, that happy face on a yellow background. But then clearly they should be in Arizona given the landscape. He stops because he stops to eventually just like, sleep and eat, but he then keeps on running. He's not like he's nonstop. But then he stops one day after growing such a long beard and everything like that. And it's like, I'm kind of tired. I'm going home now. Then he eventually gets a letter from Jenny who says like, she wants to meet up with him. That's why he's on the bench. Then this old lady who's sitting there listening to the rest of the story at this third arc. She tells him that the address on the letter is like 5 or 6 blocks, just down the street. Like, you don't need a bus for that. So he meets up with Jenny, who's like a waitress now, got her own place, and she introduced to Forrest to his son, Forrest Jr., played by Haley Joel Osment. And I like the fact that, like I said, he still picks up on certain things. He asked Jenny, like, is he like me? I was like, no, he's very smart. He's, top of his class. It's like, and they all move in together into his home, because I kind of skipped over this part, but like, Mrs. Gump passed away from cancer and everything like that. But then you realize after Jenny and Forrest finally marry, a year later she passes away because she dies from this kind of illness. Don't know why you couldn't just make it cancer again, but it's just a mysterious illness that nobody can figure out. And you see like Lieutenant Dan show up to the wedding, and he has, titanium prosthetic legs now, a clean shaven and everything like that. He even married. He's even got a fiance who's a Vietnamese lady. Which is some irony for you, but I'm pretty sure there's plenty of guys from the war back then who end up marrying a Vietnamese partner. Then Forrest now taking care of Forrest Jr., teaching him how to play ping pong and fishing with him, and now he's sending his own kid off on a school bus, and that's where the movie ends. It's the best story, one of the best stories ever told, honestly, and it's like an all-American type of tale here. Just through the periods from like the mid-50s up to 1981, in that period of, because it's a very important piece of history right there. Even the fact that at one point he meets up with President Nixon, and it's like, Forrest mentioned about the kind of living quarters they got on, man. He's like, and Nixon's like, no, we can do something better. And he goes to the Watergate Hotel, and Forrest has no clue. He sees, he's late at night, and he sees like, during the whole Watergate scandal, it's like, Forrest is inadvertently responsible for like putting an end to like the presidency of Nixon. It's like there's like some guys with flashlights, and it's keeping me up at night. And then also Forrest was a part of the whole thing with what you call that, when they start allow black people into the same school as white people, and you see like the whole moment where like Vivian Malone Jones, who dropped her book, and like Forrest picks up and hands it right to her. It was like the Governor George Wallace's stand in the schoolhouse door moment, where they literally have like the National Guard, keeping racist people from trying to force black people out of the schools. It was during that cinema moment. He also inadvertently meet Elvis, and because of his leg braces and how it moved, gave Elvis the inspiration of how his dance moves work. So yeah, like Forrest has been like a cinema icon in American history, and he doesn't even realize. But yeah, that was Forrest Gump. Like, honestly, like, do yourself some favors. If you haven't seen it in a while or haven't seen it at all, highly recommend. It is an incredible film. Love this film. So yeah, It's very fun, very fun. But anyway, let me know in the comments below what you think of this film at all, and I will see you guys probably later tonight as I go back to Street Fighter 6 and see if we can fit in some FF16 afterwards. We'll see. I gotta give me something to eat first because I exercise. Early this morning, and I did some cleaning up and laundry, so I'm kind of famished at this point. I need to refuel before I get into playing some games. So I'll see you all a little bit later tonight. Take care.